Well, today I have a guest with me, Andrii Murzin, here in Kyiv, and he's going to share a little bit about some of his perspectives about the gospel and how it's related to a lot of the things that are going on in Ukraine right now, including the war, maybe some of the political aspects that are involved in that. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. So I want to start off, Andrii, just to ask you to share a little bit about yourself, what you're doing here in Kyiv, and some of your background, so people can get to know you.
Right. Thank you, Caleb, for this opportunity. I am from Kyiv. I've always lived here, almost always. I work at Kyiv Theological Seminary, and I'm the program director of MA in Biblical Counseling.
Okay.
So I teach mostly biblical counseling, but also Old Testament. And one of my specialty courses that I developed is on contextualizing Protestant ministry in the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox culture. So
you would consider Ukraine as a primarily Orthodox country?
Right. We can call our culture, Orthodox, of course, with some reservations, but that is the main, long-term cultural factor of influence.
And I don't want to get into that too much now, because I want you to share a little bit about yourself, but we can get into those questions a little bit more. Sure. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about your teaching, your ministry here.
Those are the three main areas that I teach. Biblical counseling, by biblical counseling we mean almost the same as discipleship, except with a lot of attention to the person's heart, the person's motivation, what the Bible calls a heart before God. Relationship with God, motivation, and biblical authority and sufficiency is a huge value for us in biblical counseling. So, which means we believe we should not borrow from secular ideas, secular philosophies, as for example, secular psychology, which is based on a totally different anthropology and soteriology and so on. So that's biblical counseling.
And you also do some volunteering as a chaplain?
Yes. Since the full-scale invasion in 22, even before that, even when the war originally started in 2014, I have sometimes felt this need. The thought bothered me that the soldiers are, even since that time, were fighting in Donbass. But then after 22, when the war became much closer and much more intense and much more obvious that it is our war, not somebody else's war, I realized that as a Christian, I have to be active. I cannot, ignore. That's the area of one of the biggest needs. I often say that if Jesus was preaching today in Ukraine, Matthew 25, is it? He could have said, I was in prison, I was,
in the trenches
in the hospital, and I was in the trenches, and you did not visit me, or you did not stand beside me. So I think it's very relevant. So that's why I do serve as a volunteer chaplain.
Which I think we should probably make mention of this, that last night was a huge attack on Ukraine. And are you living in the city of Kyiv or just outside or somewhere?
In the city.
So tell us, what did you hear? What did you experience last night?
My wife and I, we live in a high-rise building on the 15th floor of 16 floors, so second from the last, which is a little bit nervous during an attack. So for that reason, yesterday, as you know, the coming Russian attack was no secret, and there were a lot of warnings in the news. So what we did is last night we just came here to the seminary and we spent the night here because we
Ah.
were able to sleep on the first floor, on the
Yeah.
second floor, and we heard a lot of explosions, very very close.
Although, no, we just came just an hour or two ago from a high-rise apartment building where a complete section was taken to the ground. I don't know if it was a missile, because we also were here last night. We heard missiles. We heard a lot of drones. It's not very far from the seminary. Are you familiar where that building is?
I know the place. I know the place
Yeah.
very well. I saw the photos. Our rector, Ruslan, the rector of KTS, he was there. He lives very close, and he was physically came to the place and tried to check if he could help, and he actually took some pictures. So yeah, it's
Yeah, unfortunately,
terrible.
we were just there and we saw them pulling a body from the rubble, and unfortunately, I think they're going to be pulling more over the next 24 hours from that. So that when you say it came to us, the war is still here. I mean, literally just a kilometer or two away
Right,
from last night.
right.
Yeah.
But also, related to your question about chaplaincy, I often speak to other Christians about this, that this should be a very obvious moral obligation to the church now, when there are people who are giving their lives, giving their health to protect us from the Russian murderers, from the Russian aggression. The church cannot be, indifferent, complacent.
So,
stay
I mean,
away.
yeah, and that's a good point, because I have heard that said, okay, well, the church shouldn't take positions on these things. The church needs to be apolitical, in a sense, right? Is it being political to say that you support Ukraine, or that you are against the invasion of Russia into Ukraine?
Well,
what do you think on that?
Define, as they say, define political.
Right.
I'm sure you know that the word, policy, politics, is from the Greek polis, which means city. So just the fact that we live in the society already means that we are, this way or another, we are involved in politics. At the very least, we are, all of us living in the society, we are enjoying, we are using the services of the government. For example, the relative, of course not perfect, but relative order, relative security, relative, protection, which is, all of that is done by the government, through the government, by the hands of, army, police, and so on. So I think it would be very hypocritical and at least self-deceiving to enjoy all of those things, and at the same time to say, I'm not involved in politics, but you're using all of those benefits that are achieved by today in Ukraine by the people who are dying or losing their limbs, for you to have those things.
Well, let me ask you this. What would you think would be, what have you noticed, or would you think it'd be important for Christians in North America to understand about what's happening right now in the context of war and the church in Ukraine?
Right. Well, probably a number of things. One of them, I think it's important for the Western audience to understand that Ukrainians are fighting for our survival, because Russia basically wants to eliminate Ukraine as a country. And in doing that, and this is not the first time the Russian Empire has been doing it, it's done it to Ukraine, it's done it to other countries, and we know from history, from facts, from past facts, that in the process they kill people by, hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So,
And you're talking back, World War II, World War I,
The 30s,
Okay.
what's the 20s and the 30s, what Stalin did, what the Soviet Union did
Great
to
Purge.
Ukrainians, even before under the Tsars, and what Russia has been doing to the Baltics, to Poland. So I think I've noticed a number of times in the Western media, the pro-Russian kind of rhetoric, saying that this stupid, this ridiculous war is fought over territories. Well, who cares? Well, can't you agree about some, can't you divide? Can't you draw a line? Well, we are not fighting over territories. We are fighting for survival. Because if we surrendering to Russia means, that many more people will be killed after the surrender. That wouldn't be a peace deal which, stops killing.
What about basic freedoms? Do you see a difference in freedoms that are allowed, and specifically thinking about the church and the preaching of the gospel? Is there any difference? Because I know that I've talked to people personally, say, well, Russia, Ukraine, there's really no big difference there. How would you understand that? What would you say?
Just the opposite. I mean, huge difference. Russia has always been a dictatorship, and in the last 2-3 decades, it is much more now. I mean, there is no freedom of speech there whatsoever, including the issue of religious freedom. The churches in Russia have to be necessarily pro-Putin politics. They have to be pro-Russian. They are often persecuted if they have if there is any suspicion of any kind of ties with Western churches. They're immediately labeled foreign agents or something. They have the legal term for that. And another very obvious example is look at what's happening in the occupied territories of Eastern Ukraine, where Russia has captured. They're just killing priests. Both Orthodox priests, Catholic priests, Protestant ministers, dozens, at least dozens, I don't know the numbers, at least dozens have been killed. Many churches have been destroyed. While in Ukraine, on the contrary, we have, for the last, since the fall of the Soviet Union, as long as I can remember, we have enjoyed enormous freedom of religion, of preaching the gospel, almost unlimited. I mean, sometimes I half jokingly tell my American friends that we have more freedom in Ukraine than you do. Like, for example, can you go to a public school in America and preach the gospel? I don't think so. But in Ukraine, you can do it. Or take my, we just mentioned the volunteer chaplaincy example.
Yeah.
I mean, people who are not official chaplains, who are not on the roll in the army, are very welcome, and they go in hundreds, maybe thousands, and they're very welcomed by the army, by the commanders, by the government, and we get all kind of welcome and support. And there are many other examples.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think I've told people the same, that there is definitely an aspect where Ukraine enjoys more freedom. And that's one of the things I've also heard often, and it seems like is going around in a lot of the conservative groups, is that Ukraine is persecuting, the government of Ukraine is persecuting Christians in Ukraine. Would you agree with that? Why not? What do you see?
I know what you're talking about. I know where it's coming from. It's a lie. This lie is based on the, perverted fact. What they take, the pro-Russian propaganda, they use the fact that Ukraine has been limiting the Russian church in Ukraine.
Russian
and
Orthodox
its-
Church.
Yeah, the Russian Orthodox Church in its rights, because, well, for obvious reasons, because the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, it has a different, the official name is a little different, but it's
Russian Orthodox Church, Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarch, right?
They call themselves Ukrainian, but everybody knows that they're in very close and very important ties with the Russian Orthodox Church, and the Americans don't know this context, but they need to understand that the Russian Orthodox Church has always historically been an ideological right hand of the government under the czars, and then the same thing under the Soviet rule, at least since 1943, when Stalin, under the pressure of the allies of America and Britain, when trying to get their help in the World War II, Stalin kind of gave freedom to the Orthodox Church, but he basically created a puppet church, which has been since then serving political agenda of Kremlin, of Moscow. So that church has its branch in Ukraine and has been using it for pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian propaganda.
Right.
And therefore, for obvious reasons, Ukraine should have done it much earlier.
Yeah, it's actually surprising to me
But
that
at
it took
least
so long.
now, at least after the full-scale invasion, after 22, Ukraine has finally been...
So what did Ukraine do? Did it say you cannot worship here as a Russian Orthodox, or what actually did Ukraine do?
Absolutely not. They have just limited them in some of their rights. They have. I'm afraid I don't have all the
that's fine.
all the details, but like for example, they here's a fact. Again, chaplaincy. To serve in the army as an official army chaplain, you can be from any kind of religion, any kind of Christian church or Muslim or Judaism or something, but unless you're a member of that pro-Russian Orthodox Church. That is the only...
Yeah, my understanding is that Orthodoxy, they can worship, do their traditions and everything, as long as they sever the ties with Moscow.
Right.
It's just about severing ties with Moscow. Is the only thing.
There's a huge, very active, very lively Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which has nothing to do with Moscow.
So it has nothing to do with religious traditions or faith traditions.
Exactly.
Everything to do with, are you taking orders from Moscow or not?
Right, exactly. This is there is no religious persecution in it whatsoever. It's simply an obvious political act in the context of the war.
Maybe on the other side of things too, and I'm not sure how much you know about this, but do you know kind of what the role of the Russian Orthodox Church is on the other side, coming from Russia, and as far as the invasion? Do they support the invasion? Are they? What is their
absolutely
involvement there?
Absolutely, like I said, the Russian Church has been basically the ideological department of Kremlin. You can put it this way. So they have been very actively promoting the war, calling it all kinds of titles as a holy war, almost like the jihad kind of thing. So supposedly they are, they're the pro-Christian, for all the good things, and interesting for the Western audience, by the way. And who do they consider the enemy? They're not fighting Ukraine Ukraine only, as they often say and emphasize. They're fighting the West, the evil, liberal, anti-Christian West, including America, of course, primarily.
And that's a really good point, because I think that here's something that is important to understand in all this and have clarity, that from the Russian side, and for some good reason, they say, look at the LGBTQ movement, and sexual revolution, mainly pointing to homosexuality and those types of things, and saying we are going to hold up the moral standard. We are against these things. We're promoting traditional families, traditional family values, and so we're promoting Christianity, whereas the West isn't. How could, as the church, how do we understand that? Should we say, oh, okay, yeah, bring Russia in because this will be good for the church because this is biblical, they're promoting biblical standards?
Right. Well, of course, that's propaganda. That's a lie. Philosophically and logically, every lie always have to contain some element of truth.
Right, I mean, because they are against homosexuals, as far as I understand. The Russian government, let's say, they have certain laws against promoting it.
Just like Hitler was against homosexuals, and he was killing them, executing. He was killing Jews, homosexuals, gypsies, handicapped people, who else? Elderly, I don't know. So there is this very important principle. The higher things cannot stand without, or cannot exist without the lower things. Applying that to morals, if this, in this case, the Russian society, the Russian leadership, Putin, for example, if they don't care about the basic principles of justice, if they're okay with killing people, by the way, not only Ukrainian people, but also their own people, which Russia is not only doing now, but has done for decades, for centuries.
Well, and actually, you could argue in this war, there's more Russians dying than Ukrainians.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, if they don't care about people's lives, they really, truthfully, they couldn't care less about family values, homosexuals, or they're just using that. That is an obvious, I share the concern about the Western society, getting more liberal, and I'm also, I'm totally, as a Christian, for all the family values and all, except with an important correction. We shouldn't hate those people. We should love them and, wish to save them.
Which I think that Ukraine has this interesting position because Ukraine as a culture is more traditional in its outlook on family than, let's say, United States and Western Europe in general, I think.
Yes.
And so generally you have a bit of a more traditional, as far as the development of the LGBTQ movement is far, far behind United States and Western Europe.
Right.
Not saying that it's not going to grow. Obviously, they want it to grow, but it's far behind. There's much more traditional values. So it wasn't like Ukraine needed Russia to come in and protect their traditional family values. Not that they would necessarily do that.
I suppose you, as a missionary, probably know this fact that when the Soviet Union collapsed, or since after the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine has sent dozens, if not hundreds, of missionaries to Russia. Historically, Ukrainian church, for centuries, all Christian churches in Ukraine, both Orthodox and Protestant, have been much more numerous, much stronger, both in number of churches and a number of people, than Russia. So Ukraine, and it's a known historical fact, Ukraine is the cradle of the Slavic Christianity.
Slavic Christianity came from Kyiv.
From Kyiv, exactly.
Right where we are right now,
So any kind of Russian claim that they're much more, that they're much more Christian and for traditional Christian values, that's a lie. And again, like I said, the politicians are just using this as a propaganda issue. Hitler did the same thing. He claimed to be pro-family, pro-traditional values, and Putin does the same thing. They couldn't care less.
Maybe switch gears just a minute and let's think a little bit more about the Ukrainian church. What are the challenges that you see right now within the Ukrainian church as far as remaining true, faithful to the gospel, preaching the gospel. How is this war affecting the Ukrainian church, and what challenges is it facing?
Well, as always, God uses this war as, there's this biblical image of desert. A desert as a place of testing. How God brought the people of Israel through the desert, and in the wilderness was the place where their faith was tested. How will they respond to the hardships? Will they trust God? Will they be, faithful, obedient, or will they rebel? So God does this all the time, except He uses different kinds of circumstances in our lives. And so the same thing now with this war. God is testing the church. On the one hand, the war has opened many new doors for ministry, for evangelism. Like, for example, again, this chaplaincy thing. It's a huge, before the war, oftentimes we would pray or think in the church, how do we reach Ukrainian men, especially men, because women oftentimes are more open, to communication and blah, blah, blah. But how do we reach the men? Well, here you go now. You can go to the army as a chaplain or even serve there and just be a Christian there. And you have thousands of men much more open today when they face the reality of death, of war, that makes all people think about, eternity, about your soul, about God, the spiritual issues. So there are many new doors like that. There are thousands of, hundreds of thousands of refugees, people who have moved, for example, to Kyiv from the eastern or southern regions. And many churches have responded, actively serving those people. Many churches are sending chaplains. Many churches are welcoming the refugees, serving them both physically and spiritually. And so that's one of the ways how God uses this war. On the other hand, some difficulties also surfaced as the one, I don't know, how would we say ухилянство in English?
Dodge drafters.
Dodge drafting, or dodging.
Or dodging the draft, yeah.
Dodging the draft.
Or draft
Draft
dodgers.
dodging, exactly. Thank
draft dodgers, yeah. That's what it's called.
So I think one of the ways it shows in the church is when when Christians say, we are beyond politics. How do you say? Вне политики.
Yeah, we're not involved in politics. Apolitical.
We're apolitical.
Yeah.
And using that as an excuse not to serve in the army and not to have anything to do with the army, with helping them.
Yeah, and I guess, and maybe just for context too, so that people would understand that mobilization is what it's called here. Right. And it's not like it's done, or in the past in the United States, where you just get like a letter show up in your, post box, but that, down on the street somewhere, there might be a group of draft military, and they would stop your car, check your documents, and then if things are not in order, they'll take you and forcibly take you.
Just happened, excuse me for interrupting, just happened to one of our brothers in the church last week.
And so there's a lot of negative news about that, and I think Russia's using negative news about that too to try to look bad on Ukraine. But that affects the church a lot. And I know from my context in Odessa, one of the problems that we have is that even from one part of the city to another part of the city, I have brothers in the church that say, no, I will not travel through the city at all, And so then you have, it results in a lack of men who are willing and able to do, teach, and to serve in the church. What can you say about that, or I don't know, what are your thoughts there?
That's a very vivid example of one of those testings by God. Because generally, as Christians, what values, what ideals do we proclaim? Do we profess? We say, that we're saved, that we are not afraid of death, we're not afraid of eternity. We know that we are, our future is secure. We're with the Lord. We believe the gospel where Jesus says, "Do not be afraid of those who kill your body, but they cannot kill your soul," because everything is in God's hands. So then that's where God's testing comes in, where we have to prove in action that we really do believe those things. And what is happening now, we see that many people claim those theological ideas, Christian ideas, but when reality comes, they're not able to follow through.
I guess, and rightfully, understandably so, right? Because this is, it is sometimes coming down to a life and death matter. Not all the time. We had, in fact, just after I filmed this, we're going to go and visit a member of our church who was drafted 2 years ago, I think. And he was just driving somewhere. They stopped him. They picked him up. And now he's serving for 2 years. And we have relatives that have been drafted. We have, a lot of people, and you probably know a lot of people that have been drafted as well, right? So it's not necessarily a death sentence. But the other thing that I think about too, and that is, last night, we all could have died. Exactly. And there were people that were just sitting in their apartments here last night that died.
Exactly.
So what's the difference of, being drafted and being closer to the front? But I also think that God uses that in the sense that He's actually taking believers. If I as a believer refuse that, I'm also refusing to be in a position where I could possibly be used of God greatly.
Sure.
And my and this is just my personal experience, I guess. Maybe there's some biblical support to it I could find. But it seems to me that God often uses us greater in those places where it's less comfortable,
Sure.
and as long as we seek comfort and over, our greatest goal is safety, we're probably going to be a little less useful for the kingdom of God.
Sure. Well, it's all over the Bible, the examples of it. I'm trying to speak about it carefully, and I'm trying not to be judgmental. I understand that this is, it's not easy. It's difficult. There was a point a couple of years ago in my life when they also stopped me in the street and brought me to Titsika, to the drafting place. And it was not easy. I felt, this fear and worry. But so I'm trying to be gentle, and understanding, merciful, but at the same time, I think we need to be, connecting those Christian values that we proclaim, and showing that we should speak about it openly. That today is a time when we need to, prove. When our actions have to prove that we really believe all that, and overcoming fear.
So you do see a connection to certain gospel truths. Absolutely. And the situation with mobilization of the men in Ukraine.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that Christians should show this victory over fear. That the gospel, among other things, delivers us from this fear of death, I mean, it's a clear biblical, an aspect of the gospel. For example, Hebrews chapter 2, I think verse 12, it says that, Jesus by his death, he deprived Satan of his power, and Satan was the one who had this power using the fear of death. And the fear of death is, that's where the unbelievers are. I mean, they're afraid of death because they don't know God, they don't know, they don't have salvation, they don't have any eternal hope. But we do. We Christians.